Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and this is how to use Ferrothorn. So, Ferrothorn, I'm going to start with its Steel Grass typing today, because the Steel Grass and the Steel Bug typing are absolutely ridiculous and really weird to talk about, because they create their own weakness. So, Steel Grass only has to worry about fire and fighting, and Ferrothorn is such a tanky Pokemon that it doesn't really worry about fighting as much, it's mostly about the fire. Now, Ferrothorn and Scizor are so good as Pokemon, just really powerful Pokemon, that they create the weakness for themselves. That on its own, Steel Grass wouldn't be as threatened by fire, because the only reason that fire-type Pokemon are so common is mainly to stop out Ferrothorn. That whenever you're coming up with movesets, you're thinking, I could throw on the Fire Punch here, I could throw on the Hidden Power Fire, maybe I should run Flamethrower. Like, Hidden Power Fire is such an out on so many Pokemon because Ferrothorn exists. So Ferrothorn has, just in its own, maybe a little bit for Scizor, but mostly because of Ferrothorn, has raised the usage of fire typing drastically. So that's the only thing that's causing Steel Grass to be weak. If Ferrothorn wasn't that strong, there'd be less fire, so it'd be able to get away with more in a way. It's just this weird cycle. And I hope that makes sense to you guys, because it's such a powerful typing, it creates its own weakness by only having that one weakness or so. Now the rest of it is absolutely tanky, that you get a ton of resistances, and you also have the immunity to poison, so you don't have to worry about a lot of moves doing much of anything to you, and then you have some okay weaknesses. Now your ground weakness, which would be from the steel, gets covered up by the grass, and then the grass weaknesses get covered up by the steel pretty well, like with ice and bug, so you get a really good spread with a Steel Grass typing. Look at Ferrothorn Stats. Why would Game Freak give a Pokemon that has such an excellent typing stats this ridiculous? There are cases where Ferrothorn will survive that Fire Punch, where it will survive that Hidden Power Fire. It's a 4-time super effective move, and Ferrothorn is such a tanky Pokemon that it can tank those up. That's absurd when you start to break it down. Now, we have reviewed Pokemon like this. You know, they have 100 and something in defenses and maybe a high amount on the hit points or something like that, but Ferrothorn is an excellent mixed tank. It's also just an excellent defensive, pure defensive tank, or it can also go special and eat up all the effective, super effective hits. And for some reason, it also has 94 on the attack. So, while there's really no straightforward numbers on this Pokemon, like 131, 116, it's still just going to be an absolutely ridiculous Pokemon to deal with, because it can put out a good amount of damage, and it just refuses to take damage whatsoever. Hopping into Pokemon Showdown, much like a Bungus, there's really no wrong way of running Ferrothorn, that if you just think about it long enough, the answer will come to you. Most of the time when you click on a guide, you want to understand if there's anything you're missing when you're using this Pokemon. Like when you go to a guide, you're thinking, alright, I have an idea of how to use this Pokemon, but maybe there's something I'm forgetting. Ferrothorn, you can't really go wrong as long as you follow by a couple of basic rules. You use Leech Seed, Protect, and then whatever else you want it to do. Now, in the most generic cases, you're going to see Stealth Rock. Very, 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 very reliable Stealth Rock Pokemon, because as I mentioned before, there are cases where even the 4-time super effective hit onto Ferrothorn isn't enough to knock it out, so you're going to be able to get Stealth Rocks. And then there's Gyro Ball. Gyro Ball works out really well. You have almost no speed. I mean, even if you want to get really fancy, you don't even run an Impish nature, you'll go for something that actually slows you down even more to get more damage out of that Gyro Ball, so it also depends on what you're going to do. Impish if you want to be defensive, and then you have a lot of really crazy breakdowns, but as long as you're investing like purely into hit points and purely into defenses, you really can't mess it up with Ferrothorn, and that's just like one of the crazy things about Ferrothorn. So now I'm trying to look for it. We're going to want the Relaxed nature if we want to get more damage out of the Gyro Ball. Probably like a couple points more, because it really doesn't matter when you have 20 base speed at this point. So if you want to really balance Ferrothorn, I was thinking you go 252 into hit points, 252 into special defense, and then we go defensive nature, extra point defense, and now look at this. This is just absolutely filthy. 350 on the hit points, then we have 330 in both defenses roughly, and that's not even where Ferrothorn gets so dumb. What makes Ferrothorn so dumb is the Iron Barb's ability. Pokemon making contact with this Pokemon lose 1/8 of their maximum hit points. So if you're using something like Flare Blitz, you're using something like Fire Punch, even the fighting type moves, that Ferrothorn's off weakness. So if you don't have any fire to deal with Ferrothorn, you're gonna have fighting. Now fighting, a large majority of the time, is going to be able to make contact, because you're using a move like Brick Break, you're using a move like Close Combat, High Jump Kick, something like that. So you're going to take damage whenever you're trying to hit Ferrothorn, and even if you don't have a super effective option, well then, you're just going to have a really bad day, because the grass typing Earthquake isn't super effective on it. So if you make contact with any other pleb move, it's just going to eat it up and take no damage whatsoever, while giving you a lot of Iron Barbs to worry about. So we get into a lot of really interesting things from there. Other than that, Leech Seed. Pretty much you just want to set up the Leech Seed and play it through. That Leech Seed, 1/8 of your hit points coming back, roughly. It steals 1/8 of the targets. Now against Sweeper Pokemon, it's going to be slightly less. But that's stacking with your leftovers. You're just going to be pretty tanky and getting a ton of health back. So you throw out the Leech Seed and you get leftovers and stuff, and you're getting 3/16 of your health, and then you're going to use Protect again, so you're getting 3/8 of your health. You're almost getting half your health back before your opponent can attack you again. So as long as you're just tanking up and not taking super effective hits, you're good to go. Now the thing about super effective hits, there's Pokemon like Heatran out there with Flash Fire. There's Pokemon that resist fighting type moves, so you just bring a couple of those and you're going to be good to go. So you just like have Flash Fire for fire, something that will absorb fighting type moves really well, like a ghost type Pokemon, and then you can keep your Ferrothorn safe whenever you feel that safe for it to bring it back in. Just switch it in on anything, water type move, even neutral hits, it doesn't matter. Now I think the hardest thing about Ferrothorn, that really it's a brain dead Pokemon. You throw out the Stealth Rocks, and then you Gyro Ball with the Leech Seed until they eventually go away, and you just play it like a wall. That if you feel you're just not going down, like you're not getting knocked out and you're frustrating your opponent, then you're playing Ferrothorn correctly. So that's why we have the only thing that makes Ferrothorn the slightest bit technical, Leech Seed. The trick to Leech Seed is throwing it out back to back from time to time. If you feel your opponent's going to switch, no one wants to be sitting in on a Leech Seed while you're healing up, especially if they can't deal with you. So say you bring in Ferrothorn manually, or you switch it in. So you switch in Ferrothorn, you're going to set up the Leech Seed, they try to hit you, realize they're not going to do anything to you, they're most likely going to want to switch out. If they don't have Fire or Fighting, or they have a better Pokemon deal with Ferrothorn, they can just throw out the Leech Seed again. So back-to-back Leech Seed might not make sense because you can't double seed an opponent, but if you get them on that switch in, now that Pokemon's already seeded, they have to do damage to you, but you're already healing it up faster than they're dealing damage. And like I've said before, there are cases where even if they bring in a Pokemon, if it isn't a Stab Fire Punch or a Flamethrower and they just have a Hidden Power Fire just tacked onto some Pokemon, you're going to be able to do really well. So you might survive that, and then by the time you Protect and Leech Seed and get all that health back, you'll be around half hit points, if not more. They can switch out into your Heatran or whatever Pokemon's meant to absorb what Ferrothorn's dealing with, and they're still seeded taking damage. So you can get some really weird conversions just by sticking it out, and the opponent might not expect it. Also Stealth Rocks, Stealth Rocks is insane, and Ferrothorn is one of the most reliable Stealth Rock Pokemon. As for that, you can run Curse, Iron Head, Leech Seed, Protect. Now, instead of Gyro Ball, I like Iron Head because, say you get Max Curse, and they have some kind of Pokemon, like a very tanky Water-type Pokemon, Vaporeon could wall you out or something. Even though Vaporeon would probably wall out the Iron Head set, the idea behind it is that if you run out of your 8 Gyro Balls, then you're kind of in trouble with this set, so it takes away all of your setup. So at least with Iron Head, you're doing less damage, but it's slightly less damage because Curse is still boosting your attack incredibly high, and it just gives you more PP. So it gives you a lot more chances if you're not 1 or 2-shotting your opponent to where you can still tear through their team. The idea behind this is if they run out of Fire-type special attacks and they don't have a Focus Blast on their team, you just come in, you set up Curse, or you go for Leech Seed, then you just Curse and Protect until you keep getting health back, and whenever you feel right, just throw out the Iron Head, and that's going to be a crazy amount of stab damage. Or not Iron Defense, the Iron Head, and that's really all that there is to it. That if they have a very heavily physical-oriented team, they're going to be hitting you with that Iron Barb, so they're doing a little bit of damage to themselves, and then you're still getting Iron Head damage while healing up on Leech Seed. Pretty much you want to use this set if you already have a Stealth Rock Pokemon. If you already have a Pokemon going for Spikes, Stealth Rocks, Entry Hazards, it doesn't really make sense to bring on Ferrothorn, and now it can just run Curse instead and be absolutely absurd. Now it also does get access to Swords Dance. So if you want to get stats faster, you're not worried about being as much of a tank, Swords Dance into whatever, and that's where we get to the other options. This is not a moveset for Ferrothorn by any way, even though it actually can kind of work as a moveset, but these are some other options. If you don't want leftovers, Rocky Helmet, really fine, because they lose 1/6 their maximum hit points on top of the Iron Barb's 1/4. So if a Pokemon like Kangaskhan, like you just bring in Ferrothorn onto a Mega Kangaskhan as it's trying to go for like Power Up Punch or Return or something like that, it's not going to do a lot of damage to you, but it's going to take a ton of damage from the Rocky Helmet and Iron Barbs, and then you can also carry out some other things on Ferrothorn. Power Whip, it has very high amount of PP, so you can run that on this Iron Head set, but then you can get walled out. Grass Poison typing, not going to be able to do too much damage to that. If they have a Sap Sipper, you're going to be in trouble, but it is still a ton of damage. Swords Dance and the Power Whip, that can actually find some really serious hits right there, but the accuracy is also a bit of a problem. And then we also have Thunder Wave. Ferrothorn can just carry Thunder Wave. Also, you might see Toxic on it. It's a really good Toxic stall Pokemon. Slap Toxic, slap Leech Seed, and then you protect until your opponent goes down. That'll happen from time to time as well. But Thunder Wave, bit more of that supportive aspect. That it layers on the Spikes, it layers on a Leech Seed, and then it goes for Stealth Rocks, and then it lands a Thunder Wave. So even if it sacrifices itself, like this Ferrothorn, you're meant to stall out. That you might actually take away over a full Pokemon's worth of hit points, you know. You Leech Seed 3 of your opponents over a couple turns and then hit 1 or 2 Gyro Balls or something. It's going to be effectively a 1-for-2 Pokemon by the time Ferrothorn gets knocked out, even if it ever does get knocked out in the battle, which is why if you're playing it for that, yeah, then you can do that. If not, if you just want to be a sacrifice, go for that Thunder Wave. You might be able to Thunder Wave one of their sweeper Pokemon, you know, you survive that hidden power, you go for that Thunder Wave. They still might outspeed you because you're really slow. But now their sweeper is lowered, you have Spikes already set up, you have Stealth Rock set up, maybe something like that. It is something to consider. So that's going to be Ferrothorn. Mostly, like I said, there's no real wrong way of playing Ferrothorn as long as you're applying basic game knowledge and just frustrating your opponent. So that's the thing about Ferrothorn. Like, it creates its own fire weakness that it's only that strong, so other Pokemon that are weak to fire are actually getting screwed over just from Ferrothorn's existence. And that's kind of all there is to it. So if you guys enjoyed the video, that's how you use Ferrothorn. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.